I sentence you to 3 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections. Those 2 sentences to be run concurrent with and not consecutive to each other. Ma'am, please understand that on count 4 of the indictment, you may be subject to a period of post-release control upon your release. And if you violate that post-release control, the Adult Parole Authority is authorized to return you to prison for up to 9 months for any single violation and up to 50% of your prison sentence for all violations.
50-year-old Brenda was stabbed nearly 30 times and bludgeoned with a cast iron skillet by her own daughter, Sydney, at their Akron, Ohio home on March 3, 2020. The exceptionally violent murder occurred after Brenda discovered that Sydney had stopped attending college and had been keeping it a secret from her. Brenda was reportedly on the phone with school administrators when the deadly argument broke out between her and Sydney, the latter of whom was charged with murder. Sydney's trial centered heavily on her ailing mental health. In the months leading up to Brenda's murder, the former straight-A student was dismissed from university due to poor grades. During that time, Sydney's roommate noticed that she was sleeping excessively. They later recalled the young woman having major memory blackouts despite her lack of drug or alcohol use. Sydney's defense attorneys claimed that she was hearing voices when she killed her mother and argued for a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. During the trial in September 2023, experts gave conflicting testimony about whether they believed Sydney was legally insane at the time of Brenda's murder. The jury found Sydney guilty of murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison but won a major victory in December 2024 when an appellate court overturned her conviction. The victory was achieved based on the argument that the judge who oversaw the trial erred by refusing to allow the defense to call an expert witness to rebut a state expert who testified regarding Sydney's mental state. As of February 2025, prosecutors are fighting the ruling and are asking the state's Supreme Court to reverse the appellate court's decision. Number 19. Shannon Vince Gilday. 32-year-old Jordan Morgan was fast asleep in her bedroom at the Richmond, Kentucky mansion of her father, former state representative Wesley Morgan, in February 2022 when an intruder broke in during the early morning hours. Armed with a rifle, the suspect, later identified as 23-year-old Shannon Vince Gilday, fatally shot Jordan in her bed, then exchanged gunfire with her 71-year-old father, who was injured but survived. Gilday fled the scene and law enforcement immediately got to work in their efforts to identify and catch the killer. Speaking anonymously to the Daily Mail, a source later revealed that a neighbor of Gilday's had tipped off the police to his identity, claiming that he had shown them a real estate listing for the Morgans' $6.5 million home and said he would kill everyone inside. As a large-scale manhunt for Gilday ensued, his mother, Katie, wrote in a Facebook post that her son was not of sound mind and was distraught with the certainty a nuclear war was imminent. Katie also wrote that Gilday had recently spoken about the prospect of building a bunker and his belief that the CIA was following him, and she said she had tried getting her son psychiatric help but to no avail. The information in Katie's Facebook post led to speculation that Gilday targeted the Morgans in an attempt to gain access to an underground shelter beneath their house. Located 26 feet underground, the bunker was built after Barack Obama became president in 2008. Equipped with a 39-inch ceiling and 15-inch thick walls, it's reportedly one of the most secure homes in the United States. The search for Gilday lasted for a week and spanned multiple states. A Madison County deputy picked him up while he was attempting to return to the mansion, and he's been in custody ever since. During Gilday's first court hearing, an investigator testified that the accused killer had confessed to murdering Jordan Morgan. Additionally, Gilday said that he was determined to gain entry into the home by any means necessary, including by building a tunnel to the so-called Doomsday Bunker. In May of 2024, the court ruled that Gilday is competent to stand trial. According to the most recent available updates, prosecutors are considering pursuing the death penalty in accordance with the wishes of Jordan's family. A tentative trial date has been set for May of 2025. Number 18. Zackary Yashkus. Zackary Yashkus first fell under legal scrutiny for his violent tendencies in 2012 when he was accused of slashing the throat of his girlfriend, Sheree Thompson, but he escaped accountability and walked free, marking a missed opportunity to stop him from the horror that occurred 4 years later. In November 2016, 23-year-old Yashkus, 21-year-old Thompson, and their young son were all found dead from gunshot wounds to the head. Part of the reason the first case against Yashkus had failed to go anywhere in court was because Thompson was unwilling to cooperate with the prosecution. By the time Yashkus killed her, they were no longer together. A few hours before killing the victims, Yashkus had posted a photo of a gun, a beer can, and a liquor bottle on social media. In the post, he wrote that he couldn't control his demons, offering no additional explanations for what he would do later that morning, and taking any other reasons he may have had for committing the murders to the grave. Number 17. Christina Nicassio. 69-year-old Dr. Anthony Nicassio was stabbed to death inside his upscale Plum, Pennsylvania home during the early morning hours one day in May of 2017. Police were called to the scene at around 3:30 a.m. by Anthony's wife, who told a 911 dispatcher that the couple's daughter, 27-year-old Christina Nicassio, had pulled a knife on her father. At the time, Christina's parents were trying to talk her into getting psychiatric help because she was talking irrationally in the aftermath of a bad breakup with her ex-fiancé, which had occurred just days earlier. Anthony was trying to take the knife away from Christina when she stabbed him at least twice in the chest. After being taken into custody, Christina told investigators that she felt like the world was ending and that she really didn't want to go to the hospital at her parents' urging. She admitted to taking the murder weapon from the kitchen hours before actually putting it to use, indicating that the crime was premeditated. Christina also claimed that she was trying to reenact a scene from the movie The Mummy Returns, when she stabbed Anthony. She was charged with murder, but the case remains unsolved nearly 8 years later due to her ailing mental health. Christina was ordered to undergo treatment at a secure long-term residential facility. In early 2024, she was engaged in ongoing discussions with the court about the possibility of being allowed to live in her own apartment in Dormont. She said she planned to live in close proximity to her godmother, who could provide continued support. But it was soon discovered that she had actually signed a contract to purchase a home in Monroeville, which is located a half-hour's drive from Dormont. Moreover, Christina had failed to inform the court that she was planning on living with a man named Antonio Vecchiola, who had been convicted of killing his wife. After discovering Christina's dishonesty, the judge ordered her to remain at the treatment facility for at least another month, to wear an electronic GPS monitor, and to meet with a therapist who would explain the nature of Vecchiola's crimes. In the meantime, the murder charge remains pending. Number 16. Jaime Taylor. 27-year-old Anthony Souvenir was at a Walgreens store in Miramar, Florida, with his young son and his girlfriend late at night on February 3rd, 2025, when he mistakenly accused 28-year-old Jaime Taylor of staring at his girlfriend. Taylor was adding money to his Cash App account and had been in the store for several minutes prior to Souvenir's arrival. The two men briefly exchanged words, and it seemed like the confrontation was over when Souvenir overheard Taylor talking on the phone and believed he had made a rude comment toward him. Souvenir's girlfriend would later tell police that she overheard Taylor telling Souvenir that he wasn't even talking to him and that he was on the phone. The argument nevertheless resumed and soon escalated. Upon noticing that Taylor had a gun, Souvenir made it known that he was also armed. Taylor pulled his gun out of a fear for his safety, but initially refrained from firing, but pulled the trigger when he saw Souvenir reaching into his bag. Souvenir died from his injuries and Taylor fled the scene but turned himself in to law enforcement hours later. He remains held without bail at the Broward County Jail on a second-degree murder charge. Number 15. Kevon Watkins. After returning from school to his Bibb County, Georgia home one day in February 2018 and becoming frustrated with his family's slow Wi-Fi connection, 18-year-old Kevon Watkins changed the network's password so that his Xbox would be the only device running on the connection. But this didn't exactly fly with the rest of his family, including his mother, who tried removing Kevon's Xbox from his bedroom. Kevon also got into a heated altercation with his 20-year-old sister, Alexis. Court testimony would later reveal that Kevon put Alexis in a chokehold and refused to let go, even as his brother tried getting him to release his grip on his sister's neck. More than 10 minutes passed before police arrived at the scene and pulled Kevon off Alexis who died from her injuries. Kevon was charged with murder and opted for a bench trial, which meant that he was leaving his fate in the hands of a judge rather than a jury. The defense argued for a conviction of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter, but the judge found Kevon guilty as charged and sentenced him to life in prison. When the newly convicted killer was given a chance to speak in court, he was sobbing so hard that the only words anyone could understand were, "I'm sorry." Number 14. Robert Lyons. In March 2008, 61-year-old Linda Bolek was found murdered inside the Carroll Stream, Illinois apartment she shared with her 39-year-old son, Robert Lyons. Someone had beaten her with a champagne bottle, stabbed her repeatedly in the back, and doused her body with household chemicals. Perhaps not surprisingly, police were immediately interested in speaking with Robert. They tracked him down at a local Hooters restaurant several hours after discovering Linda's body. Robert quickly confessed to bludgeoning and stabbing his mother in a fit of rage after she refused to use her connections to get him box seats to an upcoming Avril Lavigne concert. He denied that his bipolar diagnosis had anything to do with the crime and was charged with first-degree murder. During Robert's trial in 2011, prosecutors argued that the murder was premeditated, while pointing out that neighbors had recalled hearing frequent arguments between the defendant and the victim. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before finding Robert guilty as charged, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He'll be 73 years old when he's paroled in the year 2048. Number 13. Diazien Hossencofft. Gurley Chu Hossencofft immigrated to the United States from Malaysia in 1993 after meeting and marrying Diazien Hossencofft. The couple lived together in Albuquerque, New Mexico until 1999, when Gurley moved out and filed for divorce. She accused Diazien of threatening to kill her and told her co-workers she feared her estranged husband, whom she found out was lying about being a doctor and living under a fake name. Born Armand Chavez, Diazien Hossencofft claimed to be a geneticist who was suffering from cancer. In reality, he was a career con artist and fraudster who had gotten kicked out of medical school. He had kept up the ruse using forged documents and through sheer manipulation and deception. Hossencofft made a living by selling bogus anti-aging injections and fake cancer treatments to unsuspecting patients, and he was just as dishonest when it came to his personal life. In addition to having multiple affairs behind Gurley's back, he fathered an out-of-wedlock child with one of his mistresses 3 years into their marriage. Shortly after separating from Diazien, Gurley suddenly went missing. Her absence was first noticed by her co-workers when she failed to show up for work one day. Diazien quickly became a suspect in Gurley's disappearance, but he had left for South Carolina the same day his estranged wife was reported missing. Investigators soon shifted their focus to Diazien's girlfriend, Linda Henning, who claimed to have no knowledge of Gurley's disappearance. Henning also denied knowing Gurley, but police were able to prove that she was lying, and she was charged with perjury the month after Gurley vanished while the investigation continued. Gurley's body was never found, but enough evidence was uncovered for detectives to conclude that she had been murdered, including her clothing and some duct tape. Henning was tied to some of the forensic evidence through DNA, and police also found a ninja sword inside her home, which had been purchased on the day Gurley was reported missing. Feeling confident that they had a strong enough case to proceed without a body, prosecutors charged Diazien and Henning with Gurley's murder. In 2002, Diazien pleaded guilty in order to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life plus 61 years. During Henning's trial later that year, Diazien testified that he had masterminded Gurley's murder, that someone else had carried out the crime, and that Henning was not involved. He claimed that he had planted Henning's DNA on the evidence connecting her to Gurley's apartment, where authorities believed the victim was killed. Despite Diazien's claims, the jury found Henning guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, tampering with evidence, and 4 counts of perjury. Prosecutors pursued the death penalty, but Henning was spared from capital punishment and sentenced to 73 years in prison. Number 12. Gina Han. Identical twins Gina Han and Sunny Han immigrated to the United States from South Korea with their parents at the age of 12. The overachieving sisters went on to become co-valedictorians at their Orange County, California high school. They were competitive but close until a falling out over a car and other money-related issues drove them to become bitter enemies. After spending time in jail for stealing from her aunt and uncle, Gina was accused of stealing Sunny's BMW and wallet. Determined to get revenge against Sonny for making the allegation in the first place. Gina spent several weeks plotting her twin sister's murder with 2 teenage male accomplices in 1996. Gina's co-conspirators, Archie Bryant and John Sayarath, gained entry into 22-year-old Sonny's apartment in Irvine by pretending to be magazine salesmen. Once inside, they bound and gagged Sonny and her roommate. Sonny pleaded with the intruders not to kill her. She told them they could take anything they wanted, but they forced her and her roommate to sit in the bathtub still bound while they ransacked the apartment. Thankfully, police arrived at the scene in time to save the women and prevent anything worse from happening. When officers knocked on the door, one of the suspects returned to the bathroom and frantically unbound the victims while instructing them to tell the police that it was all a joke. Gina was still at large later that day when she used Sonny's ID to withdraw $5,000 from her sister's bank account. She also used Sonny's license to apply for a car loan. When confronted by police later that evening, she claimed to be Sonny and handed over her sister's ID. The male suspects never offered a motive for their roles in the crime, and the best explanation anyone could come up with for Gina's desire to kill Sonny was that her actions were revenge and perhaps greed-driven. While investigating the case, police discovered that Gina had bought gloves, duct tape, polytwine, and pine sol the day before the home invasion. Dubbed the evil twin by police and the media, Gina was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, burglary, and false imprisonment in 1998. She was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison, but was paroled 20 years into her term in 2018 at the age of 44. Number 11. Hannah star Esser. An argument about a cat between an actress and a motorist in Cypress, California, took a deadly turn in September 22 when 20-year-old Hannah star Esser accused 43-year-old Victor Anthony Luis of trying to run over a feline with his SUV. Both individuals exited their vehicles and got into a shouting match, which Esser captured on video using her cell phone. After getting back into her car, Esser allegedly made a U-turn and intentionally struck Luis with the right-hand corner of her front bumper. Luis went onto the hood and windshield, then rolled repeatedly and ultimately landed on the pavement. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and Esser was charged with his murder. Esser's bail was set at $1 million, and records show that she remains in custody amid the ongoing case. Number 10. Dontila O'Mahony. Determined to get her hands on a house that didn't belong to her, 43-year-old Dontila O'Mahony of Long Island, New York, fatally shot 69-year-old Lee Pedersen in his Aquabogue home in March of 2020. Officers found Pedersen dead from a single gunshot wound to the back of the head, and his cell phone, money, and car keys missing. O'Mahony was identified as a person of interest through interviews with people who knew her and surveillance footage, which placed the vehicle she had been driving near the crime scene on the day of Pedersen's murder. The car was also seen returning to Pedersen's residence hours after he was killed. After returning home to New Jersey, O'Mahony had asked a friend to get rid of a 9mm handgun he had recently purchased for her, along with some clothing and ammunition. Detectives managed to recover the ammunition, which contained both O'Mahony's and Pedersen's DNA. They also found a forged will naming O'Mahony as the inheritor of Pedersen's home, while the woman's name was conspicuously absent from the authentic version of the document. In early 2023, a jury found O'Mahony guilty of second-degree murder, criminal possession of a forged instrument, and grand larceny. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Number 9. Korena Roberts. During the summer of 2009, a 27-year-old Portland, Oregon woman named Korena Roberts was accused of cutting the unborn baby out of her pregnant friend, 21-year-old Heather Snively's body. Neither of the victims survived, and Roberts' boyfriend arrived home to find her in the tub with the lifeless infant. Police found Snively's body hidden in a crawl space at the residence, and Roberts was arrested on suspicion of murder. Roberts' boyfriend cooperated with the authorities and was cleared of any wrongdoing. Just weeks before her death, Snively had moved to Oregon from Maryland to live with her baby's father. She met her killer through an online classified service for infant clothing and other baby items, and police believe she had gone to exchange baby clothing with Roberts on the day she was killed. For months leading up to Snively's murder, Roberts had pretended to be pregnant. She also contacted several pregnant women through the online classified service. According to prosecutors, she beat Snively with a collapsible police baton before using a straight razor to open her abdomen. Roberts was initially charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, and 2 counts of first-degree robbery. In October 2010, she pleaded guilty to one count of aggravated murder in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Number 8. Alexis D. Simpson. In September 2011, 19-year-old Bowie State University student Alexis D. Simpson was accused of murdering her roommate, 18-year-old Dominique T. Fraser. Following an argument over an iPod, Fraser was found unconscious and bleeding profusely from a stab wound in the hallway of her dorm building. By then, Simpson had fled campus, but she turned herself in later that day to police in Prince George's County, Maryland, and was charged with first-degree murder. According to news reports, Simpson and Fraser had been fighting for days and were both in the process of seeking new roommates. Simpson was reportedly angry at Fraser for playing loud music on her iPod. During her trial in November 2012, Simpson argued that she had acted in self-defense, testifying in her own defense. She told the jury that Fraser was grabbing her by the hair and pummeling her repeatedly before she began swinging a knife around. The fight ended with Fraser suddenly grabbing herself where she was injured, at which point Simpson claimed that helping her roommate became her primary focus. In a turn of events that shocked prosecutors, the jury acquitted Simpson of all 7 charges that she faced, including murder and carrying a deadly weapon, and she left the courthouse a free woman. Number 7. Joshua Davies. In October 2010, a Welsh teenager named Joshua Davies bet his friends that he would commit a murder for a cooked breakfast. He lured his former girlfriend, Rebecca Aylwood, into a wooded area in the village of Aberkenfig and mercilessly beat her to death. Davies left the young woman's body lying face down on the forest floor and attempted to frame a friend for the crime while feigning concern for Rebecca's well-being. Investigators later discovered that Davies talked about his desire to kill Rebecca months prior to the murder. The friend he had made the bet with later said that he didn't think Davies was serious, just like the many others who had previously brushed off Davies's disturbing mentionings of wanting his ex-girlfriend dead. In July of 2011, a jury found Davies guilty. He was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 14 years, and now that the end of his minimum term has approached, Rebecca's mother has been vocal about her desire for Davies to remain behind bars for as long as possible. Number 6. Jemma Lilley and Trudi Lenon. During a childhood that was later described by prosecutors as troubled, Jemma Lilley became obsessed with serial killers. She aspired to become like the murderers she looked up to, and even told a friend that she hoped to kill. By age 25, in 2016, Lilley befriended a woman named Trudi Lenon who shared her macabre affinity for serial killers. The two women moved into a home together in Rockingham, Western Australia, and began plotting to turn their fantasies into a reality. In June of that year, an 18-year-old autistic man named Aaron Lee Pyich Sweetman vanished from the same town after failing to return home. Phone records and surveillance footage soon led investigators to Lenon and Lilley, who were identified as the last known individuals to communicate and be seen with Pyich. A week after Pyich went missing, police paid a visit to Lenon and Lilley's home, where they found Pyich's remains buried beneath some concrete tiles in a 12-inch deep grave in the backyard. He had been stabbed multiple times and there was evidence that he had been strangled. Lenon and Lilley pleaded not guilty to Pyich's murder, but eyewitness testimony and evidence indicated that Lilley had boasted about killing the victim. Prosecutors accused her of committing the murder as a bucket list item with Lennon's help, while Lenon pointed the finger solely at Lilley and claimed that she only helped hide the evidence after the fact. In 2017, a jury found both women guilty of murder. They were each sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 28 years to serve behind bars before becoming eligible for parole. Number 5. Robert Lombardi. A 65-year-old Massachusetts man named Robert Lombardi stands accused of killing his roommate, 80-year-old Frank Griswold, at their Marshfield home for getting too close to their Thanksgiving feast. Griswold apparently had a tendency to sneeze a lot, causing Lombardi to feel concerned about keeping his face a safe distance from their holiday dinner while it was being cooked. Police responded to a 911 call about an unresponsive male at the home and found Griswold bleeding from a head wound on the kitchen floor. He also had a fractured neck and was taken to a nearby hospital where he died from his injuries. According to a police report, Lombardi had shoved Griswold during a disagreement over his proximity to their Thanksgiving meal, causing Griswold to fall and hit his head. Lombardi told law enforcement that after initially warning Griswold to stay away from the food, he stepped away from the kitchen only to return and find his roommate lurking in the no-go zone. He admitted to getting physically aggressive toward Griswold and has pleaded not guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Number 4. Sabrina Kouider and Quissem Medouni. 21-year-old French national Sophie Lyonnette was working as a live-in nanny in southwest London when her abusive employers killed her in September 2017. For reasons that may perhaps never be explained, 35-year-old Sabrina Kouider became convinced that Lyonnette was in a romantic relationship with Kouider's ex-boyfriend, Boyzone band member Mark Walton, even though the two had never even met. Plagued by this delusion, Kouider and her partner, 40-year-old Quissem Medouni, starved Lyonnette, beat her to death and then burned her body in their backyard while grilling chicken in an attempt to cover up the smell of burning flesh. A neighbor nevertheless smelt the foul odor and called the police, who reported to the scene and quickly discovered that her body had been set on fire. Medouni tried telling officers that it was a sheep carcass, but by then they had noticed charred human fingers and a nose. While the medical examiner was unable to determine a cause of death, it was clear, based on Lyonnette's injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken jawbone, that she had been beaten over a days-long period leading up to her murder. In the months prior to killing Lyonnette, Kouider and Medouni had essentially tortured her into admitting to a romantic relationship with Walton. The couple had filmed themselves brutally interrogating the terrified young woman, whom they also accused of being a spy and having an unnatural attraction to minors. In the footage, Lyonnette could be seen growing noticeably thin. Lyonnette had moved to the UK from her hometown of Troyes in northeast France in January 2016 to improve her English. During her time spent living with Kouider and Medouni, she became known among many local residents, including a restaurant owner, who later told BBC News that Lyonnette was quiet and seemed to be struggling, but that he had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. According to prosecutors, Lyonnette's mother had bought her a plane ticket to return to France, but the ticket and Lyonnette's passport were never found during a search of the accused killer's home, leading to the suspicion that they had gotten rid of the items in order to keep Lyonnette captive. Kouider and Medouni blamed each other for Lyonnette's murder, but they were both found guilty in 2018 and sentenced to at least 30 years in prison. Number 3. Sharon and Deborah Halstead. Police in Grants Pass, Oregon, happened upon a shocking crime scene in November 1988 when 32-year-old Lynn Green and her young son Nathaniel were found suffering from gunshot wounds in the kitchen of their home. Using the victim's blood, the killer had scrawled "Trust in Jesus" on the wall. Lynn's husband, David, narrowly survived after being shot while running to a neighbor's for help. Nathaniel was paralyzed but survived, and Lynn died from her injuries. Sisters Sharon and Deborah Halstead were soon identified as persons of interest in the case. They were members of an offshoot group of Seventh-day Adventists who believed that angels spoke directly to them. The group's members were convinced that Deborah's son, Leo Shively, had especially strong powers when it came to communicating with entities from beyond, and that he therefore had the power to distinguish good from evil. Deborah and Sharon were accused of shooting the Greens and a fourth victim, 58-year-old Marston Lemke, because the victims had been deemed to be totaled or completely overtaken by evil. In 1989, Deborah pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and was sentenced to 2 20-year prison terms. She was paroled at some point, but little is known of her current whereabouts. Sharon pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder and was sentenced to 75 years to life in prison, where she remains to this day. Today's topic was requested by Calibre 733 Records. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Lester Bauer. Lester Leroy Bauer Jr. killed 4 men in 1983 during a botched attempt to steal an aircraft he had previously agreed to buy from a man named Bob Tate. He initially only planned to kill Tate, but ended up fatally shooting the other 3 victims, Jerry Brown, Sheriff's Deputy Philip Good, and former police officer Ronald Mays, when they showed up at the hangar unexpectedly. By the time police found the 4 men dead from multiple gunshot wounds to the head at the Grayson, Texas hangar, Bauer had fled the scene. An aircraft was missing from the hangar, which police later found pieces of at Bauer's home. Bauer initially denied ever being at the crime scene. He later admitted that he had gone to the hangar, but claimed that all 4 victims were still alive when he left. In addition to his story being suspicious in the first place, Bauer was unable to produce proof that he had legitimately purchased the plane that was missing from the hangar. By all appearances, Bauer was an average married man in his 30s with a steady job and no prior criminal record, but these factors failed to garner the sympathy of a jury who found him guilty of all 4 murders and sentenced him to death by lethal injection. On June 3, 2015, after more than 30 years on death row, 67-year-old Bauer became the oldest prisoner to be executed in Texas since 1976. Number 1. Surfers killed for tires. At least 4 victims, including 2 Australians and an American, were murdered during a surfing trip to Mexico's Baja California Peninsula during the spring of 2024. The bodies of Australian brothers Jake and Callum Robinson, US national Jack Carter Road, and an unnamed 4th victim were found in a remote 50-foot deep well several days after Rode and the Robinsons vanished during a surfing trip. Callum, Jake, and Rode had all been shot in the head. The 4th victim had been in the well much longer and was therefore killed much earlier than the other 3 men. It's unclear whether the homicide is thought to be linked to the same suspects, but investigators said they hadn't ruled out the possibility. Following the discovery of the bodies, Chief State Prosecutor Maria Elena Andrade Ramirez theorized that the killers had spotted the foreigners' truck while driving by their campsite and wanted to steal their tires. Furthermore, Andrade Ramirez speculated that the victims caught the tires being stolen and resisted, prompting the killers to take lethal action. As of July 2024, 5 suspects had been arrested in connection with the murders, including 23-year-old Ari Giselle Garcia Cota, her partner Jesus Gerardo Garcia Cota, and his brother Christian Alejandro Garcia. One of the suspects remains unnamed, while the 5th suspect is known only as Angel Jesus N, or Angel Leon N. The case appears to be ongoing. Thanks for watching. Which topic would you like to see next? Let us know in the comments section below.